All right, here we go. Deep Cinema here, your host, Theron. So, I do not have a review for you this week, but I have a topic. And if you're watching this as opposed to listening to it, you can see what the topic is, or you can see the title no matter where you are. And that the question that I'm asking and that I want to break down is it time for a black owned studio? Or more to the point, why hasn't there been in these modern times? And when I say modern, I'm talking about probably the last 30 years, because I think it's more obvious when you go beyond that why there hasn't been a black owned movie studio. But focusing on modern times, in the last 30 years is unfortunately obvious, but now I think more than ever it is time to have a real discussion about why we haven't seen one yet, and they are popping up in pieces and by different individuals, but we still don't have a one-stop shop that is putting out diverse content with greenlit by people of color across the board in the executive ranks, and putting out diverse content and content featuring African Americans. We still do not have one entity doing that en masse consistently across the board. And I'm going to break that down here on Deep Cinema. Okay, so let's talk about this. Is it time for a black studio? So first, what prompted this and why I wanted to talk about it is, if you follow any sort of news, movie, entertainment news, you've seen in the last couple of years, Oscar so white, hashtag Oscar so white. You've seen lots of discussions and topics surrounding diversity in Hollywood, in media, in advertising, all across the board. And there has been some very recent strides made in terms of awards and accolades and nominations, and that's fine, and that's well and good, but it's not good enough. The root, because the root cause of the problem has yet to be fully addressed, and I want to talk about what those root causes are and what can possibly be done, pointing at a lot of black entertainers across the board in Hollywood that can, that is right at the precipice of doing this, but they're not doing it to the degree that it could be done. Let's put it that way. So the current state, and another thing that had prompted this too, is that there has not been a major film release, meaning, a studio release, big budget, high number of theaters, high theater count across the board, since the movie Girls Trip, which came out in June of 2017. And here we are in 2018. And we have not had a single wide release film starring predominantly African Americans since June of last year. Now we've had films starring African Americans, but none wide release. And one of the more prominent ones that has gotten notice, but it's not even a wide release, is Mudbound on Netflix. And I'm not counting Netflix. I'm talking about theatrical release. I will touch on streaming and all of that later because it does count. I'm not discounting Mudbound, but I'm talking about theatrical release. There has not been one since Girls Trip. And I'm a fan of Girls Trip, by the way. I really enjoyed the movie. Thought it was very funny. But is that all we got? Is that all there is? And that begs to be looked at a little deeper, because to point at the root problem of all of these discussions around diversity and lack of award of people of color in award categories and these kinds of things, you have to look at how films are made. You have to look at who is holding the keys, who is holding the purse strings, and has the green light button to be able to say yes to a film about NWA, or a film about 4 black women going on a trip. And for by and large, far and wide, there's next to zero African Americans in those positions that are able to make those decisions, even though the people involved in the 2 films I just named. Donna Langley is at Universal. She's head of production at Universal, and she's mostly African American, I think. But she fought for Straight Outta Compton, after it had been around the block many times to every studio. But in any case, they're few and far between executives at major studios to be able to greenlight these films. So that alone is really the core problem. And you could say racism, you could say prejudice, and those things, and yes, those things play a role, but more prominently it is because look, anybody in a position to greenlight, to be a gatekeeper, is going to have some kind of bias, and that bias can oftentimes transcend a person's ethnic or racial makeup. So I don't want to just cite racism across the board, but because the very foundation of how the studios were built and put together, at the root of it was based in a system and a time period that was extremely racist. But we are supposed to be in quote unquote better times. We are supposed to be more progressive. And we are seeing a lot of diversity on screen, especially in television. There has been a lot of probably more television shows greenlit in the past 5 years featuring and starring African Americans than there probably has, throughout history. But again, it's still not enough. we need to be behind the scenes. We need to be in the executive ranks making these decisions so that we can ensure there is more than one or two or three, a handful of films every year, major release films, quality films every year that get made. Simply, it really is as simple as that. So let me define first what a studio is, because there's some misconceptions as I talk to different people about this. The first thing people say is, well, isn't Tyler Perry a studio? Why aren't you counting Tyler Perry? He has a studio. Yes, Tyler Perry has a studio, but the term studio is multifaceted. It doesn't just mean a movie studio with sound stages and distribution and that kind of thing. It could mean a recording studio. It could mean a version of a sound stage. Studio, as I'm defining it, is an entity, a company, a media company that not only has physical brick and mortar, places to make films, but they have the means to develop material, which means that their executive ranks are connected to the talent agencies and the talent pool within Hollywood. And then they have the means to finance those projects that are developed with that talent. And then third, they have the means to distribute those projects, the finished product, out to the masses. And I'm not talking about distributing just like online or just streaming. I'm talking about in movie theaters across scale, the major movie theater chains, et cetera, et cetera. So that is how I'm defining what a studio actually is. And when you look at what Tyler Perry is doing, he is not a full-fledged studio. Tyler Perry is more defined as a really robust production company. He has the means to develop material, which is usually 95% of it his own material. He has the means to finance his material, but more often than not himself. The money is not coming out of his own pockets, for the most part. And then third, he makes deals and sells his content or licenses his content to television networks like OWN or TBS, and through studios like Lionsgate, and now soon to be Viacom via Paramount. But Tyler doesn't necessarily own those two pieces, the financing piece and the distribution piece. Yes, he is more of a creative entity, and he has brick and mortar studios, and he's building more and more of those around Atlanta currently. But that does not make him the kind of studio that I'm talking about, a major studios. And there has not been a major studio, in a new major studio, a true new major studio, really since DreamWorks kicked off in 1993 or 94. I'm getting my dates confused on when they did that. But DreamWorks, now technically is more along the lines of a Tyler Perry. They're a production entity. I think they're still financing some of their film. They're more of a. I think they've restructured their deal and made something to go along with Universal, but they are not what they was. Um, during the last 5 or 10 years, they've been scaling back, and they've had financial problems, and they had to scale back because it's hard trying to kick off a new studio and keep it running. There's a lot of overhead. There's a lot of content you have to constantly develop. It's not easy, and I'm not suggesting in any way that that this almost impossible task is just, oh well, you just put up a bunch of money and you get some people together. No. However, it just feels like we keep hitting a brick wall with these topics of diversity, with these topics of lack of content starring diverse faces. And the solution is viable, but it's a hard one. It's not an easy solution. But I have some suggestions for that. So let me continue to go down the list. So DreamWorks is or was a major, almost a major studio since then, because we really only have 5 major studios right now. It was 6, but now it's 5 since Disney and Fox. Disney has taken control of Fox's most of their entertainment assets. So you have Disney, Paramount, Warner Brothers, Sony, and was Fox, but I'm missing the 5th one because it's supposed to be 6. But you get the idea. And then you have what there is called a mini major, which is a smaller studio entity, can do the same things as a bigger company, but they're smaller in scale in terms of financing, in terms of the type of movies that they make, and the volume of films that they make. And so companies like that include the Weinstein Company, now famous now for Harvey Weinstein and his shenanigans throughout the years. Left that company. Now it's in limbo with how they're going to proceed, but they are or were a mini major studio. A company called Annapurna Pictures, which is partially owned by Megan Ellison, who's the daughter of the Oracle guru czar Larry Ellison. She has recently expanded her production operation to include distribution of her own films. STX Entertainment is another one, a recent company that has actually came on the scene a few years ago, but had some serious financial problems and ups and downs, but they're still out there. They're still developing content, financing it themselves, and have distribution deals with the theaters. And the same thing goes for Lionsgate. Now, Lionsgate may be one of the bigger mini majors because they own a lot of different assets, such as Stars, the cable channel, and Code Black, and they everyone is familiar with Lionsgate probably more than anyone I just named here, with the exception of DreamWorks. But in either case, all of those companies are still mini major studios. They're operating at a much lower overhead and output than the major studios are. So let's look at how it could be possible that a Black-owned mini major studio can be formed and operated. So I'm going to run down the list of players in the industry that I feel can step up to the plate, so to speak, or in some cases they're starting to do this. And like I had opened with, a lot of what I'm saying is being done, but by different people or different parts of the process is being done. And I'll get into that in a second. So the most obvious name that comes up is Oprah Winfrey. Oprah, for all intents and purposes, she has her own network titled OWN. However, as of recently, as of a few weeks ago, Oprah Winfrey has sold a controlling interest in her television company for, I believe, $70 million. A lot of money. But now she does not have the final say at the network that she initially started. And she has stated that, look, this is not an easy gig. It was harder than I thought, and et cetera, et cetera. And the network struggled at first until she made a deal with Tyler Perry to develop a couple of shows, and those shows have been doing well. That was until recently again, before Oprah sold her stake. Tyler Perry had moved his television operations from OWN and made a deal with Viacom, which you may know that owns BET. So now Tyler Perry will be developing new content. His older shows will still remain with OWN and continue out their run, but any new shows or new content that he's going to do is going to be co-owned or co-licensed by Viacom. Okay, so then my question is, now again, everybody may not want to do it, and it based on Oprah's quote, it's not an easy gig. Starting a studio, a network, or any type of major content operation is not for the faint of heart, and I understand. However, we keep coming back to Oprah is one of the most vocal people about diversity, and she supports it 100%, and she's called all the meetings and called out all the appropriate people. But for her to sell a controlling stake in her own company just seems like it smacks a little, and I understand it's business, and don't get me wrong, I understand that part of it, but I just feel like there's a bigger picture being missed. Ownership, and of course she gets it because the name of the network is OWN. But to sell a controlling stake in these times when we're so close, we have more opportunity for content, more talent out there, more stories to be told, and you choose to take a step back or relinquish your control. And I don't want to speculate. I can only understand through her explanation, which is not sufficient enough in the articles I've read about the particular deal. It was very brief, actually. So going down the list, but if Oprah were to keep control of her network, or she has the money, she could be planning on doing everything I'm about to say, but it's just kind of strange. It really is kind of, deserves more of an answer. So I want to talk about Will Packer, who is, by any means of the term, he is a super producer in Hollywood. Will Packer has been making movies since the early 90s, actually, starting with direct to VHS titles, and then steadily over the years making bigger and bigger films. Stomp the Yard was one of his first big hits, and then now recently producing franchises like the Think Like a Man franchise, Ride Along with Ice Cube and Kevin Hart, and the aforementioned Girls Trip from last year. This guy is a force to be reckoned with. He's a creative genius, in my opinion, and is kind of like on the level of producers, back in the day, like Joel Silver and Jerry Bruckheimer, who kind of had a brand, and they had a staple of talent around them, and they were able to kind of dip into the same well over and over, delivering content that more or less touches, aimed at the same audience. And Will Packer has done that for the most part, year over year, for the last several years. Now, Will Packer is no Oprah Winfrey in terms of net worth and ability to be able to say, I'm going to start my own network or my own studio. But Will Packer would be the ideal person to run, in my opinion, a black-owned studio. And if there are any investors out there listening, that would be the man you would want to first sit down with and talk to. Because here's the thing, Will Packer knows something that Hollywood in general has been painfully slow to catch on to, and that is the black audience is underserved. Period. The black audience is underserved. And when you come along with a decent movie aimed at that audience, it's going to hit its mark. Will Packer produced Straight Outta Compton, by the way. It's going to hit its mark. And of course the studios make content aimed at the African American audience, but they do it after the door has damn near been beaten to a pulp by the producers, the creative people that are trying to get these projects made. A lot of the studios preach, that they want to have more diversity and they want to add more executives and all this kind of thing, people of color, etc. But we just do not see the change or the implementation of those words happening fast enough. So Will Packer, to me, is, and of course there are other black producers out there, but very few white, black, yellow, green producers in Hollywood has the track record that Will Packer has. So, but he would be the one that I would go to start to have this conversation about running a studio. Another person is a gentleman by the name of Charles King, and if you're watching the graphic up on the screen, in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see something that says Micro. Charles King is a 40-something black man in LA who runs a company called Macro. Previous to that, he was a Hollywood agent for William Morris, then William Morris Endeavor, for almost 20 years. And in the last couple of years, he started this company called Macro to specifically create diverse content. And he might just be the closest thing, and this company, Macro, just might be the closest thing there is to a black-owned studio. It's not a major studio by any chance. You can't even really call it a mini major at this stage. But he has gone out and gotten his own financing to the tune of $200 million, and he is developing content with diversity in mind. First and foremost, diversity in mind. Doesn't mean that he's developing, every film is just black and black stories and this and that and black. But he is taking a diversity first approach, which is all I'm talking about, which is all I think, a studio that would be black owned would take that approach, is to make diverse content. Diverse doesn't mean just black. Diverse means everything, but with a diversity first approach. So Charles King, what has he done? He has developed and produced Fences from last year. Also the Denzel movie from last year. Well, Fences was 2016, but in 2017 It was the Roman J. Israel film from Denzel that a lot of you probably didn't go to see. I didn't see it, as a matter of fact. Shame on me. But he also financed Mudbound. It is the Dee Rees film that is I had mentioned earlier that is on Netflix. And if you haven't seen Mudbound, please check it out. It is a solid movie, and I should be doing a review on that relatively soon. So, and then he has another project going on. His company also owns Blavity. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's an online web collective of black issues and news and entertainment, et cetera, et cetera. He's just doing. He's really just getting started, but what he's done so far and how he's doing it is really tremendous. And I think if you continue to watch Charles King, he will, continue to grow. And ultimately, the thing about him, though, what doesn't make him a major studio is that he's doing all the development stuff and he has the financing, but he does not have the distribution, which means once he produces a project, he then has to go out to a major studio or an outlet like Netflix or Amazon and sell that product, for distribution. That is the only piece that he's missing, and that's a huge piece. Don't get me wrong. Distribution is a complex operation of networking and deals with complex deals with distributors and different outlets and theater chains and home video and Walmart and streaming service. All of that encompasses distribution, and you can start to see what a tangled web that is when you think about all the ways a movie or a television show, how many ways that can go, how many ways that can get to a consumer. So that leads me to talk about my next subject, Byron Allen. A lot of people may not know that name. I mean, he's been out of the spotlight essentially for years now. But Byron Allen was a comedian, back in the day, back in the 80s actually, and then through the 90s and early 2000s, he was a talk show host. But then at some point he started owning the shows that he was a host of, and then he started owning other television shows to the point where now he has a company that owns several shows, several talk shows and reality shows that play across all of television. What Byron Allen figured out is that there is a loophole kind of that he's sticking to, where he essentially owns the rights, the advertising time. He buys the advertising time essentially from the channels that he's on, that his shows are on, and then he somehow sells them for higher than he bought them for. I believe that's how his little racket works. But that racket has made him very, very rich. And there are a lot of shows that I don't watch cable television, so there are a lot of shows that his company is producing, but I wouldn't know them. But and maybe you know them. I can't even tell you the titles right now. But on the feature film side, he has acquired a company a few years ago called Freestyle Releasing, and Freestyle Releasing was this low-level distributor production company that would put out, one or two movies a year. And they were, I don't know if they went bankrupt or what the situation was, but Byron Allen was able to acquire this company, and he is starting to release movies that he has acquired through this company, Freestyle. Now, Byron Allen has boasted that he has distribution deals with all the major theater chains. And last year, he released a movie called 47 Meters Down. It was a shark horror flick that was actually owned by Dimension Films, which is a part of the Weinstein Company. And that movie did okay, did well enough in the box office that I believe a sequel is in the works. I saw the movie; it was okay. It's kind of watchable if you, I don't know, if you just want to turn your brain off for a few minutes and get some thrills in. If you like sharks, if you like water and that kind of stuff, and you probably will like the film. But in either case, Byron Allen has the distribution and he has the connections, and he is articles I've read on him, he is pushing to expand that operation and take it as far as it can go. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Code Black Films, who they are a company that has a long history making and distributing films aimed at the African American audience, mostly like in the early 90s or in the late 90s for home video, and then in the 2000s getting into theatrical. And they released a lot of just about all of Kevin Hart's earlier films and stand-up specials, and it's ran by a pair of very savvy executives, Jeff Clanagan and Quincy Newell, and now they are in the Lionsgate fold, but their mission is still the same. They have more robust resources to be able to do to reach a larger audience. Having last year released a Tupac movie, and Kevin Hart's last three smash hit stand-up specials, and continue to be involved with films going direct to on demand or Netflix and that kind of things. But they have been steadily expanding their reach, and Code Black, I know through experience, and actually had the opportunity to work with them in the past, have their specialty is really in marketing and really knowing the audience that they're targeting and knowing how to do that. And that's valuable for a company like Lionsgate that quite frankly may not have had that the diverse reach or that eye towards that audience, to be able to have the savvy to know what to do in marketing circles to reach that particular section. So, but Code Black, I would not count as, they're not a studio. They're more of a robust production entity with access to just about everything you would need, from financing to distribution. But again, they're not, exclusively, what do you would say, it's a black owned entity, but in the larger corporate scheme of it, it is a Lionsgate company. But hey, Jeffrey Clanagan and Quincy can work right alongside Will Packer and Byron Allen and Oprah Winfrey, as far as I'm concerned. But my question is this. So I mentioned Oprah, I mentioned Byron Allen, I mentioned Charles King, I mentioned Will Packer. And then I'll go ahead and quickly mention the other component would be the financing. So, you have Charles King and Will Packer with the development side and the creative side, and they have the eye for the deals and things like that. And then you have Byron Allen with the distribution network, and then you have Oprah, who kind of sort of still has a television network, but she has a god ton of money. So the only piece we're missing out of that is the financing. Now, the way financing films work at its basic level is that if you're going to be a mini major, you have to have access to cash, preferably in the hundreds of millions of dollars. $100 million can get you started, 20% down, and you can leave the lot with your new car. But seriously, in the hundreds of millions of dollars is what it takes. When DreamWorks, the founders of DreamWorks started that company back in the 90s, David Geffen, Steven Spielberg, and Jeffrey Katzenberg, who was a Disney executive for many years, started DreamWorks with $100 million. They each put up a third of that 100 million, and then the rest of the money they eventually was able to raise through the cash they put in, and through and just on the strength of their names, they were able to raise a few $1 billion. So I think it was about $3 billion or something like that they were able to raise. And now, not all of that was cash. A lot of it was credit. Some of it was stock. A lot of it was like on an IOU kind of thing. The way creative financing works. It's it's a shell game. But they were able to put on the books a couple of $1 billion, and with that they were able to. I don't think they never built the studio that they actually were planning to build. They were planning to build this big studio lot in, I believe, Playa del Rey, and there was a lot of headlines and talk about that, but that never really materialized. They ended up on the Universal lot for many years, but like I said, now DreamWorks has sort of transformed into a mini major in some sense of the word. But so if we're talking about $100 million, I'm seeing people, I'm seeing people like Jay-Z. I'm thinking of people like P. Diddy, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, and then Oprah again. These individuals, all of them, are have some kind of interest or already knee deep in entertainment and having personal investments in entertainment. LeBron James has a full-fledged production company. Kobe Bryant, same thing. He's trying to do bigger things, and talking about doing full-fledged movies and TV shows. But we don't. We hear about their money, but we never hear, and we hear about them talking about, yes, we got to do us, we got to do this, we got to do. But we don't. Where's the headline that's going to bring a few of them together and put up the $100 million? And then, look, our movies, black films, do not need to cost billions of dollars. Okay, a $1 billion credit facility would on a studio like I'm proposing would give, we'd be able to have 10 girl trips a year instead of just one. And I'm not saying girls trip is the gold standard, but what I'm saying is we'd be able to have more than what we've been getting. And my proposal for a black-owned studio would be, the goal should be 10 to 12 films every year, without question. There should be 10 to 12, and the budgets for most of these films can be in range from $5 million at the lowest, all the way up to $40 and $50 million. But even those on the high end, we rarely get, a film with a predominantly black cast rarely get budgets in that range. Straight Outta Compton had to beg, borrow, and steal, and with the generosity of Donna Langley, give them another $15 million that they were looking for a total budget of $30 million on Straight Outta Compton. And that is just sad. That is just simply sad. So the films would not need to cost in the billions of dollars. I'm not saying we need to have 5 Black Panthers a year. And I'm glad Black Panther is being made, and I'm glad it is what it is. But let's get a company together, a studio together, where we can develop diverse projects, where we can cast and tell stories that are rooted in the black experience, and where we can finance them ourselves, finance them, with money that comes from, and that was culled from, people of color. And then ultimately, through Byron Allen, we can distribute those films to the masses, or come up with someone. If he doesn't want it, then someone else, or we put it together from scratch. it's hard. I'm not saying it's easy. It's definitely hard. And I know that Jumanji is the number one film right now. This past weekend, Jumanji actually has overtaken Star Wars: The Last Jedi to be the number one film, and it's kicking ass. And I love the fact that that film is a diverse film. It's not all black, it's not all white. You have The Rock, who's black and white and Samoan or whatever. You have Kevin Hart, you have Jack Black, and you have the other the woman, and her name escapes me. But that is that is a true diverse film. But let's also have films that are from the black perspective, and let's have more of those films. And let's, through these names, if 6 Degrees of Separation, let's get the word out through sharing this podcast, sharing this video, and start to have more dialogue around getting a black-owned studio, because I don't think it's yes, I said it can be difficult, but I don't think it's impossible. And I think everyone that I have named, and there are many more names, but everyone that I have named can appreciate what I'm saying, and maybe they're having those conversations. I'm not in the room, but I do not see these headlines. I do not again. I see it. Charles King is doing this. Will Packer's doing that. P. Diddy is trying to start a network with Revolt. Oprah is doing her own thing, but I don't see these conversations happening between these different moguls that is going to ultimately lead to what I am proposing. So that's really it. Let's, I'm going to continue to monitor the news as I always do, and try to figure out, where all of this is going, not just, from a diversity standpoint, but from a just a general media standpoint, because, we have, we're in a time right now where where there's a big question mark around, what it means to have a theatrical release, and what types of films are going to be released theatrically versus, just on streaming or VOD or whatever. But in either case, I think it's a question worth contemplating and continuing to have discussions about. Please hit me up in the comments and ask me any questions, and we can go back and forth. But it has been a privilege to bring this to you today, and I'll see you in a couple of days with my review of Mudbound.